Sometimes you have a great idea for a video game and the only tiny obstacle standing between you and sales success is having to actually, develop a video game. Sure, you could spend a load of time and money hiring a team of developers, building technology and assembling a game over several years, but who has time for that? Instead, why not just take an existing game, dress it up with some slightly different graphics, slap a different name on the box, and then hope that no one notices? Hey, it worked for these guys! If you define sales success as shifting at least one copy. Here are 7 games that were secretly other games in disguise, and beware spoilers for the following games.
Welcome to Burkittsville, ma'am.
I'd like a room, please.
Certainly. Will your husband be joining you?
I'm not married.
I see. So you're traveling alone then?
I am. Is there a problem?
Oh, certainly not, ma'am. No problem at all. We just don't get many visitors through here, that's all. Except for the reporters, of course.
Fans of horror games will know that there's a new Blair Witch game in which we finally discover the witch's one weakness, you being too distracted by mobile phone games to notice she's trying to scare you. What said fans might not know is that this wasn't the first Blair Witch video game adaptation. In fact, there have been several, the first of which was known as Blair Witch Volume 1, The Legend of Rustin Parr. However, that game might not be what you're expecting. For a start, Blair Witch Volume 1 doesn't begin in the woods, which are the Blair Witch's signature location, but in some kind of office building full of weirdos, which is pretty much the opposite of a forest. What gives? What gives is that 2000's Blair Witch Volume 1, The Legend of Rustin Parr, is actually a continuation of 1999's Nocturne, a survival horror game from the same developer, Terminal Reality, probably best known for 2002's Blood Rain. Nocturne told the story of the improbably named secret government agency known as Spook House, which was kind of like the X-Files if it were all Molders dressed like they were on their way to a Rorschach cosplay contest. In the original game Nocturne, set in the 1920s and 30s, Spook House lives up to their name by battling a haunted mansion's worth of monsters, including vampires, zombies, werewolves, Frankensteins, and whatever's going on here. The premise of Blair Witch Volume 1 is that Spook House's next case is that of the Blair Witch, which explains why this tie-in game for a movie set in the early 2000s takes place entirely in 1941 and features none of the popular characters from the film, such as Crying Girl, Angry Guy, Other Angry Guy, The Tent. Instead, this Blair Witch game stars the main character of Nocturne, is set in the Nocturne universe, and built entirely in the Nocturne engine.
How did your instructional execution go this time, stranger?
Good.
It's basically a missing Nocturne chapter with some awkward references to the Blair Witch shoehorned in to ensure that Terminal Reality still got paid for something which no one can legally say isn't a Blair Witch game. See? Classic slow build suspenseful horror. Textbook Blair Witch.
A volcano exploded on planet Bezoik, launching particles of rock into space. One of these asteroids was captured by the squadron and brought to our labs.
If you're trying to market a breakfast cereal to kids, your first thought probably wouldn't be to include a copy of one of the most legendarily violent games of all time as a freebie in the box. Or at least it shouldn't be. But in 1996, that's almost exactly what happened when, for a brief, glorious period, boxes of Chex cereal contained a CD-ROM featuring Chex Quest, a game that was essentially the gory first-person shooter Doom. The difference was that Chex Quest had been modified to turn it into a cheery, non-violent romp that featured no blood whatsoever. Well, unless you absent-mindedly bit into the CD-ROM when it fell into your bowl. Ouch. In Chex Quest, you played as Chex Warrior, leader of the Chex Squadron of the Intergalactic Federation of Cereals, which is already about 90% more storyline than we were expecting from a game that came free in a box of breakfast food. The important bit is that your mission is to battle the disgusting phlegmoids, a mucus-based life form. You know, I don't think I'm hungry anymore. To help you in your cause, you're given a host of weapons that behave exactly the same way as the ones from Doom. There's the Mini Zorcher, which is the pistol, the Zorch Propulsor, which is the rocket launcher, and the Super Boot Spork, which is the Doom chainsaw, but instead it's a rotating spork. Which, I mean, if anything, sounds like a much slower and more painful way to go. You've really got to jam it in and work it around. All this shooting and sporking is waved away by the narrative justification that the weapons don't kill the enemies. Apparently instead, they teleport them back to their home dimension. That's right, the pain dimension. This might not seem like it has much to do with cereal, but don't worry, because your character also wears armour that's made out of a big piece of Chex. If the enemy ever discovers milk, you're stuffed, mate.
The year was 1993. Sonic was a hedgehog at the very height of his power. He was running fast, selling games, and being blasted out over the airwaves in his new animated TV show, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog.
The fastest thing alive is back in the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog.
Truly, it was a banner year for Sega's spiky blue Spokeshog. And that's why when it came to publish a cool new falling block puzzle game, Sega turned to its superstar mascot and said, "Sit down, Sonic, we're going to do a game about Dr. Robotnik." That's the story behind Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, of course, the Sega Genesis game in which Sonic's nemesis, Dr. Robotnik, pursues his lust for turning things that aren't robots into robots to the city of Beanville, which is inhabited by a race of sentient beans. And yet they still ask us, when will gaming get its own Citizen Kane? It happened, people. 1993. But that's not the whole story. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, or DRMBM, as it's known to us beanheads, actually started life as a completely other, but mechanically identical falling block game called Puyo Puyo. Puyo Puyo was a game that came out in Japan in 1991 for the MSX2 and Famicom, and a year later in arcades. In it, you matched and eliminated falling blobs known as Puyos, like Tetris, if Tetronimos were squishy and had eyes. Sega wasn't convinced Western audiences would go for Puyo Puyo's fantasy setting and storyline, in which a girl with magical powers thwarted a dark prince. So they replaced the Dark Prince with Dr. Robotnik, the other baddies with Robotnik's 12 robot lieutenants, and the magical girl with nobody. Because I guess there weren't any other characters left. In the westernised version, it was simply up to you to free the good citizens of Beanville from Dr. Robotnik's dungeons, before he could feed them into his machine for turning sentient beans into evil bean-sized robots. According to the manual, this machine was called the Mean Bean Steaming Machine, which of course symbolised the dehumanising machinery of capitalism to which the workers are inevitably fed. See? Our Citizen Kane.
The original Super Mario Bros. Game is remembered for a lot of things. Among them, the incredible music, the satisfying platforming, and the princess always being in another castle. This is the 6th time this has happened, Toad. If she's not in the next one, you're going in that lava. What people won't remember from the original Super Mario Bros. Was endlessly pulling turnips out of the ground with your bare hands. That's why it was such a surprise to fire up the much anticipated Super Mario Bros. 2 and discover that yanking root vegetables from the soil formed a key part of the game. There is an explanation though. It's because Super Mario Bros. 2 didn't start life as Super Mario Bros. 2. It started life as a Japanese game called Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, which was the result of a collaboration between Nintendo and Fuji Television, and was meant to serve as a promotional tool for Fuji TV's upcoming technology expo, Yume Kojo, or Dream Factory 87. Okay, that doesn't go a long way towards explaining the root vegetables thing, now that I think about it. But they're still in there because, apart from a few cosmetic and audio changes, Super Mario Bros. 2 is the exact same game as Doki Doki Panic. Besides an inexplicable obsession with turnips, Doki Doki Panic also gave us 4 characters to choose from based on the Expo's original 4 mascots. There was Imagine, a balanced character who Nintendo reskinned into Mario, Lena, who can briefly hover when jumping and who became Princess Peach, Papa, who is very strong and so can pull up items quicker, who became Toad, and Mama, who has the highest jump and became Luigi. Despite this being a reskin of a completely unrelated game, a lot of the details ripped straight from Doki Doki Panic are now Mario canon, such as Luigi being taller than Mario and able to jump higher, Peach being able to float when she jumps, and Toad being an unpopular character who no one ever wants to play as. Put a shirt on, Toad, you look ridiculous. It also introduced other staples of the Mario series, such as Birdo, Shy Guys, and Bob-ombs, and was a massive hit in America, selling over 10 million copies, and becoming so successful that it was re-released back in Japan as Super Mario Bros. USA. Whichever way you slice it, this is a strange thing to call an American reskin of a Japanese promotional game that was a tie-in between a Japanese TV company and the Japanese company that made the original Super Mario Bros. I mean, not stranger than having the core gameplay loop of your tentpole franchise being pulling turnips up out of the ground, but still.
Back in 2006, a game called Tourist Trophy arrived, made by Polyphony Digital, a studio that since 1999 had been known for making one series and one series only, Gran Turismo. So imagine our surprise when the developer announced Tourist Trophy, a brand new game not in the Gran Turismo series. That's something that could only be explained either by the arrival of the biblical end times or some sort of typo. Are you sure you didn't mean to write Turismo Trophy? Anyone hoping for an entirely new game from Polyphony was likely to be a bit disappointed though. Instead, Tourist Trophy could charitably be described as the Gran Turismo of motorbikes. Or less charitably, just Gran Turismo with motorbikes. Yes, the game was almost exactly Gran Turismo 4, which had been released just over a year previously. Don't get us wrong, Gran Turismo 4 is a very good game, but Tourist Trophy had the same menus, same career progression system and license tests, same graphical and physics engine, and all its circuits were ripped from its four-wheeled predecessor. Oh, apart from the Circuit de la Comunitat Valenciana Ricardo Tormo. Which they then reused for Gran Turismo on the PSP in 2009. And while Gran Turismo was described as the real driving simulator, they barely even bothered to change that tagline for this game. As a result, Tourist Trophy described itself as the real riding simulator. Apologies if you were expecting a gritty reboot of Barbie's Horse Adventures. Hey, we're all disappointed here, horse fans.
Super 3D Noah's Ark from 1994 was a shooter based on the biblical tale of the Great Flood, in which Noah built a great big floating zoo and God killed everything that couldn't breathe underwater. What it was also based on, as anyone who has seen more than about 10 seconds of gameplay can tell you, was Wolfenstein 3D, the decidedly less family-friendly id Software game about BJ Blazkowicz killing 1 million Nazis. Here, instead of roaming around a castle shooting Nazis to make them die, Noah is roaming around his ark shooting animals with food to make them fall asleep. Ah, the big lunch sleeps. I know them well. Got to get through this list before my lunch burrito kicks in. And although I'm a little rusty on my Old Testament, I'm pretty sure Noah is only supposed to have 2 of every animal on the ark. This begs the question as to why there are approximately 8,000 goats on board. Although that would explain why Noah has to clean house quite so ruthlessly. All but one lucky breeding pair have got to go. Presumably all these other goats are going into the larder or over the side. But as to the game's resemblance to Wolfenstein 3D, one of the most important shooters ever made, that's down to Super 3D Noah's Ark developer Wisdom Tree having licensed the Wolfenstein engine, given it a biblical visual makeover, and then called it a day. Wisdom Tree was a family-friendly Christian video game maker, so clearly the violent gunplay and gore for which the Wolfenstein engine had been originally tailored had to go. But the straightforward reskinning of a bloody shooter into a biblical story made for a curiously awkward adaptation, in which, for example, Wolfenstein's Nazi blasting guns became a series of increasingly elaborate slingshots. And Wolfenstein's iconic final boss, who is Hitler in a mech suit, became a bear named Bert hiding in a bush. Man, they really glossed over all this stuff in the Bible.
In 1999, the obsession in PC gaming was multiplayer arena shooters, and the two big hitters, Quake 3 Arena and Unreal Tournament, went toe-to-toe that Christmas. But what if you were one of those kids whose parents had the slightest understanding of what a video game was? Well, then you wouldn't be allowed those ultra-violent murder simulators, and you'd instead be stuck with Nerf Arena Blast. At least you could console yourself by the fact that Nerf Arena Blast was essentially a modified version of Unreal Tournament, but swapped the gritty sci-fi aesthetic for a cheery, colourful visual style inspired by Nerf toys. It basically looked like a firefight inside a Dave & Buster's. Which, I mean, hey, I too get angry when I lose at skee-ball. All the weapons are brightly coloured non-lethal Nerf launchers, opponents are never killed, just painlessly eliminated, and the mode Deathmatch was renamed to the altogether more parent-friendly Point Blast. I'll leave you to decide whether the mode called Ball Blast is parent-friendly or not, or the gun named Ballzooka. Stop giggling at the back there. The biggest problem with Nerf Arena Blast though was that although this was a kids game, it featured the same AI bots as the original Unreal Tournament, who had moments of lethal accuracy. It was basically the equivalent of that time your older brother pinned you to the floor and fired Nerf darts into your face at point blank range. No, I haven't forgiven him, and yes, Christmas dinner is still awkward. At least it wasn't a Ballzooka. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. And if you were being really mean, you could say that this video is just a reskin of all the many other list videos about video games that we've already done. If you'd like to watch another one of those, they're all really good. We've got one up here from us about re-releases of games that fixed some horrible problem with the original version. And down here we have a video from our sister channel, Outside Extra, about the end credits that we could actually be bothered to sit through. So please enjoy those.